My first story is I started as a leadership trainer, and I was leading a full day class. It was on negotiation skills. And I started the class. I accidentally, the marker rolled off the table in front of me. I bent over to pick it up. And when I did that, the entire back of my pants split open. And I then had to finish one, acknowledge it, finish the whole rest of the day, and I never was able to turn my back to that class ever. So totally embarrassing. It became an ongoing joke for me. The second is I was working at Comcast, just brought in a new senior leader for retail, going through the transformation into the Xfinity store, so a high touch experience versus a transactional payment center. And as you can imagine, a huge shift in talent, skills, leadership. And we were meeting for an hour to go over a proposal around the process and the recommendation. Halfway through, he just threw his hands on the table and said, "This has totally missed the mark. This is exactly what I don't want to do." And I stopped and I said, "Time out. Can I have a break?" So I went into the bathroom down the hall. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I can't, like, just how did I get here? Screamed, looked in the mirror, pumped myself back up and said, "You need to walk back into that room and figure this out, not run away and hide." And I walked back in and just said, "Okay, so why don't you share let's go. Let's figure this out together." In the end, he said it was the best meeting he had all week. It was a Friday. He said, "This is my best meeting. I love this meeting." I'm thinking I just was pulverized internally and just so, shaky. And, I learned, you got to engage the meetings before the meetings, meet with your stakeholders. He was very passionate about this, and I hadn't done the right kind of stakeholdering, socializing, discussing, making sure those check-ins along the way. And I learned never to do that again. Those are my two embarrassing stories.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You're sitting down, so I'm not worried about pants splitting for this. And also, most people will listen to this, but if we don't hear the tear, we'll be good. I am curious though, how did you get away with just back to the wall for an entire day?
I didn't have any clips or pins, so I actually took tape and kind of taped them together across my butt. So that is so embarrassing that it caused, I never had my backside not facing the back of the room, the front of the room. So I made it work. It happened and it became this big joke. They kept trying to get me to turn. So then the class was totally it was the most engaging class I ever had because it was trying to get how to embarrass the facilitator, which is great, right? That's how you get their engagement. But they never got me to. I never did.
Oh, that's too funny. But I like that. It sort of humanized you, so they were probably more willing to open up and learn.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they were highly engaged. And my joke after that was maybe I need to do this at every class, right? This works. I know.
Tear
But I
away
think it was
pants.
exactly rip away, and to your point, I think the entire authenticity of just pure horror look on my face when we heard it and I felt it and I looked up and they looked at me, it could not have been scripted better. So yeah, there was just that, the flush when your face goes red, and I was like, okay, did you guys hear that? That was my pants.
This is not a dream. Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Hello and welcome to Skilled, the podcast where we speak with remarkable L&D and HR leaders to hear the stories and the strategies behind the skills that drive measurable success. I'm Karen Rosenfeld, here with Omer Glass, GrowthSpace's CEO. Today's guest is Phil Rhodes. Phil has over 20 years of experience leading large-scale transformational change initiatives across industries like energy, environmental services, technology, and hospitality. He is currently the Chief Learning Officer at Phillips 66, where he partners with business leaders to drive talent development and support the organization's growth and sustainability initiatives. Throughout his career, he's held senior leadership roles at Waste Management, Hilton Hotels and Resorts, Comcast Corporation, and Verizon. That's a lot. Hello and welcome, Phil. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the fact that congratulations, you're onboarding at your new role at Phillips 66. Can you talk us through like what you would consider to be a successful onboarding and what you're doing right now to ensure your success in this new endeavor?
Sure, sure. Yeah, one thing I've learned in my career is the importance to create relationships in the business, kind of stakeholders, and primarily with business leaders, to understand what their vision is. I've really found almost every senior leader has a need in the talent space. They truly, one, they came as leaders, frontline leaders, individual contributors, so they know the journey. Two, they understand people are their number one resource, right? They're usually in the operating kind of businesses I work in, they're our largest expense. So they are our greatest asset. And so when you position them like that, they have opinions they would like to share and they're excited to share them. So I think that's one. I call this a listening tour. So, but start with kind of that senior leader listening tour and then ask them to invite me to speak to their team and allow them to do that. And what's been incredible here is I've been now aligned to a mentor within the operations side of the business because I'm not from this industry, a senior leader equivalent to me, which is great, incredibly gracious offer. I've gotten that across multiple lines of business, so that's very helpful for me for my onboarding. And then they've either invited me to their staff meetings to introduce myself, or just if they're smaller teams, individually allowed me to kind of begin meeting with their teams with me saying, I'm going to come back with my findings. Right. And what I'm hearing to see if that aligns into what they're sharing. So that's one. The other is part of this listening is get out and listen to people leaders, right? I start with the people leaders because they're in that role. They're leading individual contributors, the largest portion of our workforce. What are their pain points? What's working? What's not working? What would they like to see more of? So doing some focus groups in that space. And then I would say in the learning space, listening to my team, listening to my people. What is just listening to what's working and what's not working. And then underneath all that is just a lot of reading of data. So looking at quarterly business reviews, our latest earnings reports, looking from an L&D, any kind of space, anything we've developed as part of our kind of high level designs or our strategies. What are the business strategies? So really getting grounded in the business needs and what our needs are, so that when I'm meeting with and listening, I'm connecting that to the business. And I think then that helps us prioritize in the learning kind of talent space, but also speak the words of the business, right? Because they don't speak our language. We speak a different language. And if you go to them with our language, they glaze over. They don't know what you're talking about, and nor should they have to. That's why we're here. We're here to interpret and support the growth of the business through people.
I will ask a follow up on that. I think the nice thing about onboarding is that for most people, unless you're staying in the same company for ages or it's your last role and you're retiring, you will do onboarding a lot, like often, right? Every 4 years, every 5 years, something like that. Usually, if it's good, if it's successful. And every time you have your background, you have your credentials, but you need to make a first impression because you do we form the first impression only once. Now I understand the listening, the learning, everything from your end, but I think from what I'm seeing, usually I see successful onboarding of like my employees, people who join the company, or with like leaders in the space like yourself that we work with, is that it's about the impact, right? About, did you tell them something, you like you said, something you didn't know, or you delivered an extreme amount of impact that they will say, wow, if this is what Phil can do in his first 90 days, 100 days, let's figure out what he can do like in a few years. Like it can be really big. So it's a lot about the impact and the actual change. So I wonder how you look at that. So, okay, you got information, you spoke to people, you listened to them, you listened, you read everything. How do you deliver this impact, like in the first 100 days, like to create something big that will be remembered?
Yeah, that's great. That's so spot on. Um, so through the listening, you can clarify really quickly. So when I met with our senior operations leader, he shared a lot, but we doubled down on frontline leadership and the importance of that. It was very clear he wanted that done now, not 2025. So we are in 30 days going to he's going to launch a program this month, speak to it with our CHRO around the program that's coming. And I, behind the scenes, have earned the trust that we will design a really impactful frontline leadership development program. So, to your point, that happened instantly. 30 days after 16 days from when I met with him, he's got a target script. It's coming. We're going to start the first cohort of class this quarter, really build it out in 2025, learn, ideate, etc. So I think that's absolutely critical. On the CHR side, my boss, his first request is I want to make October the month of learning. I started August 5th. So I was like, okay, we did a day of learning. Now you want 30 days of learning? Yet where I saw that as an opportunity is exactly what you just mentioned, an opportunity to bring impact across all of the organization, right? Because this is for all employees. We're indexing in our operations, not just headquarters, because that's some feedback we've gotten. Yet also as I'm meeting with business leaders, I'm also explaining what month of learning is and asking for their support for leadership to encourage everyone on their team to enroll in at least one learning experience. And so it's shifting. One leader said, wow, that's the first time anyone's ever come to me and asked me to communicate to my team the importance of learning. And I was like, great. Do you support it? And they're like, heck yeah, yeah. And we're all growing, continuous learning, curiosity. So, to your point around impact, we're being able to deliver that immediately. And I'm not the team has developed, designed, and deployed and brought forth these offerings. So I think yes to immediate impact. I think then prioritizing, and we have our top three big bets through the beginning of the year. One of them is frontline leadership. One's accessibility to learning. How do we make our learning available to all employees, deskless and desk? So we're working on that. And then, and those are impactful big bets that we're going to have in place by Q1, if not earlier. So I think you're so right around listening, activating, and then getting back to them in a space of ownership. So they're not waiting for us to own it. The leaders are owning it because I've listened, we've listened, and we're now designing it. And this is we're in support of the business. The business makes the money, not us. We create the engine and the intellectual horsepower and the curiosity for us to continue to grow and develop our people. So great flip from listening to impact.
And I can take three takeaways for that I would highly recommend everyone listening to adopt. I think one thing you did is to connect to what matters the most to people. I came back from Chicago with one of our Fortune 500 customers, and I met the CHRO and the CLO there. And after the meeting that was mostly about the CLO, I looked at the CHRO and I asked her, "Hey, what can I do that will serve your interest, basically? Like you're presenting to the board. What slide do you want to present to the board that I can help with?" She came up with like two new ideas. When you serve a specific goal of a specific leader, because everyone has something on their mind, so you connected both to the CHRO and to the business leader, which is brilliant. You identify the people you need to impress, basically, and you connect it to what they need, which is simple and brilliant. I think number two is you show them that you can deliver fast. It's so frustrating in organizations, especially in large organizations, how slow it is. Everything is so slow, right? So yeah, I'll do it in 2025, I'll do it in 2026. And that's usually the day to day, again, in a large organization, like I believe tens of thousands of employees. And you show them that both things can be done in 30 days. So now they say, wow, this man delivers. And I think the third is focus. Like you didn't try to do a lot of things. You just focus, okay, I'll do two things. I will do them exceptionally well. This is all I'm going to do. And I love it. I think it's Peter Thiel's concept of just one thing, right? I'm trying always to focus on one thing we're going to drive because, again, we cannot do everything. So I think those are three really good principles for onboarding. So thank you for sharing that.
And I think that's a direct thread we had spoken earlier when we were preparing for this a while back. And we talked about how you always look for executive sponsors for anything that you do. And it sounds like you have sort of laid the foundation for always having executives at your side and fully bought in before you even implement everything because you've already done the listening, right? And you've already done the work. So I think that's so critical because a lot of the time we hear feedback where people are like, I don't I don't have anyone. No one's going to buy into this. I don't think we can do it. I don't think we do it because they haven't made those connections. So I think it's brilliant.
I've never had that problem. If you just go and listen and deliver, just kind of as we're just kind of uh, brought together, it's their initiative. People are the backbone of most companies, and they're trying to shift and to grow, and and just working within an organization with leaders. And the other thing I would say I've learned in that space, Karen, is make it personal. Like, so. With a leader, remember when you were a supervisor for the first time? Right? Everyone remembers that because it's terrifying. Like you're usually going from peer to now I'm your boss, right? I don't care where you are in your career. That's difficult. You get more skilled, but everyone can realize that, especially if you're junior, right? These literally are your friends that you sat in So if you personalize things without going too deep in it, everyone can sit in a moment and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that," and say, "Oh, that's a moment that matters. Let's focus on that." So that's another thing. These leaders are they're just like, they came up usually through the business or started and grew just like you did, or what you're trying to evolve and develop in your talent pipeline strategy. They've been in most of the seats, so they understand it intuitively, and then they rely on you to build it out to be comprehensive and better than what they could have done themselves.
Amazing. Now I want to change gears and talk to sort of like the flip side to that. Can you talk to us about a time when the sort of setup, the premise, the onboarding didn't go as planned and what you learned from that experience and how it's influenced your, what I think is a pretty streamlined and very intelligent approach to onboarding today, but I'm sure it came with a lot of false starts. So can you share some of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can almost go back to that onboarding embarrassing story with the senior leader in retail sales. um, Not being an order taker, right? There's listening, there's order taking, and then being very intentional of how you're influencing the conversation. And let me give you a couple of examples because you have to show your credibility. You have to somehow share that you have something in the space that you're discussing that they would not have thought of, because this is a space I live and breathe and read about, and I'm passionate about it. So in those conversations, just continuing with kind of accessibility. So this, no one knows what's going on, like what's available for training. What training? No one, that's a common theme I've heard many organizations. Well, then how do we bring access to learning, right? Democratize learning and make it accessible to everyone. Who doesn't want that, right? Tell me, who doesn't want everyone to have access to what they need in the flow of work, be personalized, right? Be just in time. And there's technology platforms we can use. There's technology in different ways we can get to different learners at different points. If you heard me, I'm not talking modality, right? I'm not talking LXPs. I'm not talking those are our words. When you say it like that, and in the conversations, you're talking about, oh, we want to develop our frontline leaders. I've really seen that immersive cohorts really allow leaders to learn not only a skill, but then to go out and apply it. then come back and reflect on it in a cohort group where they're learning from their peers as much as they're learning from the leaders. Classic 70-20-10 design, right? You don't talk 70-20-10, you talk that. And so you're building credibility because you're inserting knowledge you have around best practices while talking about it in a way that they understand, because every leader's learned from another leader, right? And learn from peers. So um, the bad when I didn't do that was when I sold myself short of being credible in this space and didn't tell someone, but influenced with, well, I've seen this work well. What do you think of this idea, this model? And then they don't know what they don't know. So they're like, that sounds like that could work. And I'm like, okay, we'll build, give me some time. We'll come back in a few weeks with a design. But I think those principles of learning from peers, it creates a learning culture, in the fabric and mosaic of the company. So my lesson learned was, don't just nod and say, go do a frontline program, go go do this, go do that. They're real good at that. They're operators, they're business leaders. What they need is some newer ideas that establishes credibility, puts you in a space of them being open to new ideas that you and your team can provide. And three, not getting yourself into, I'm just an order taker, because that's a terrible space to be. I've been there before. It's a hard hole to dig yourself out of. Yet, if you don't start that way and position yourself differently, it's a lesson learned. I've learned the hard way.
And I think in general, like I'm getting the two. Like sometimes as a CEO, people just do what you say. You don't really appreciate that. If people just do what you say, you appreciate when people tell you, "Hey, I get what you're saying, but," and then they're telling me what they need to do. And then, first of all, if it's a smart idea, I will just adopt it because they're the professionals, and I understand that I'm not like the marketing professional. I'm not the HR professional. And number two, like people value like courage and ability to speak up. And if you're just writing the order and delivering, it will not really satisfy, or it will not work. I think it's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates a relationship, right? You're not, and that's what
You're
we're
at the same
building here.
level. You're not.
Yeah, I'm at the same level of everyone, a frontline employee. I'm not at their level. We're at the same level. I don't know what they know. So if we're trying to implement a new, start a new process, a new training, put in new equipment, I need their insight, right? I need them as part of that. And when you talk to the leaders, oh, we talk to your employees, and this is what they value that. They know that they usually had those jobs at one point. So absolutely.
I love everything about that. Especially, I think Omar will be pretty happy with my saying as part of our values. One of it is own your domain. And that's exactly what that is, where you're brought in to own some aspect of the business. And when you fully take it on, listen to others, but then reflect it back based on your skill set, your experience, like that's how you bring everything to the next level. That's the goal ultimately. You know how to create programs, you know how to drive impact, but you can't do it alone. You can't do it in a silo. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and then it allows them to stay in that subject matter expert space and not have to do the heavy lifting, right? We'll do the lifting, but we're going to listen to you, check in with you, and there's a relief I think that comes from a CEO who doesn't have to do something they don't have the skill to do nor want to do because there's so many other things they need to do, right? Like you're going to index where you need to index for the business, the growth of the business. And if they have confidence and are seeing that you are evolving, listening, adapting, they'll stay in their lane as a subject matter expert or as a leader or a stakeholder, a sponsor. I think there is relief when you are placed in that spot and feel comfortable and confident there.
So, we're a precision skill company. Let's get to precise skills. Talk to me about if you could go back and give yourself when you were first starting out as a CLO, what advice would you give to yourself when you're first starting out, and what skills do you think you needed to really hone to drive excellence in your role?
I think, so at a kind of a leadership CLO, it's that listening um, gosh, how do you say that? It's not being quick to judgment or action, which has been I'm a quick, active, impact person. It's in my DNA. I'm not even a person. It's just how I interact with the world. You don't need to do that all the time. You need to be sitting back, listening at multiple levels, like a human level. What are they saying? At a systems level, kind of connecting systemic dots. Um, and then organizationally, what are you hearing? So you can align the individual to the organization to kind of the enterprise or kind of a learning function. And one thing I've learned is to really listen and then repeat what you're hearing for validation or non-validation. And that will let you know if you are assessing it correctly. And so there's this skill about listening slash systemic thinking slash analyzing and not quickly jumping to judgment or action, right? And that's difficult to do because most organizations want you to go straight to tell me what to do. And if you're going to shift and get co-ownership and co-creation and real impact and driving an organizational further, that's in misalignment to that. So that's one area. The other is use of data. So I mentioned that reading, have the data. So and you don't have to do a whole data dump. And I found I usually get eaten alive when I do that because I'm working with business, finance. They're far more skilled than I. However, if you have some command of data, and can leverage it and utilize it as a talking point up front on why this is important to do, or throughout your presentation as a talkover, voiceover, it adds credibility and it lands well with business leaders because they live in that space. And so, one thing I'm always cognizant is getting access to that data. And so I'm sprinkling it through in my conversations, but I've also learned not to go too deep there because this isn't my domain, if that makes sense. There's a sweet spot in there, and I'm going to ask them for access to more data, which they have usually a lot of access to because they're running a business, and that data is the data we can then use to show impact, right? And just really do that evaluation analysis. So when you have some of it, but then you say, and we would like more of it, it kind of speaks their language and brings them into, oh, they want to measure impact. They want to get to that space. How can I best do that? The business has the data. So those are a couple of things I've just learned.
I mean, I would nominate you to teach a master class on that. I think everyone would benefit. No, look, at the end of the day, like the questions we get a lot is usually about, people understand like, oh, what am I supposed to track? What the business should be telling you what you're supposed to be tracking. You have to benchmark in the same way as everyone else does in the business. That's how you show success ultimately. Did your sales leaders increase sales by X amount because that's what you were trying to do when you added this program? We have either been successful or not. How do we iterate and learn from there? So I think that is absolutely spot on.
Yeah, and know your data, like number of people who attended training, right? They're evaluation results. It's not impactful data. It's not insightful, but it's the data I have today. And I'm going to share that. 42% of your organization wins something. Now, was it the right thing? What was the impact? That's where I need your partnership. Most leaders say, call this person. They'll help you out.
I think they're begging for that, right? They're begging for a partner to help them get to where they need to go in terms of their own, KPIs.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Well, my God, we are really at the 30-minute mark here for 30 minutes of growth. So we timed this incredibly. Phil, you have been an absolute pleasure to speak with today. I want to thank you. And I think that's it for us, unless Omar, you have something to add.
I think we got a lot of wisdom today. Thank you, Phil.
Well, you made it. I can't believe 30 minutes just went by. That was I was even looking at the clock, wondering where it went. So thank you. And yeah, it's been a great opportunity. So appreciate it just through our conversations together, getting to this point, and always interested in wanting to share within our community. So thank you for the opportunity.